Hi everyone, welcome to the channel After All That Years.
Hello everyone. I've never shared something this personal online before, but I feel like I need to get this story out there. Maybe it'll help someone else who's going through what I went through. My name is Frank, and until recently, I thought I had everything figured out. A solid marriage to my wife Patricia, good friends, a comfortable life. But one night changed all of that, and what followed was the most difficult period of my adult life. It began on a regular Thursday evening. We'd gone out to our usual spot with a group of close friends, people we'd known for years. Patricia had been acting differently all week, constantly distracted, always checking her phone, giving me short answers when I'd try to talk to her. When I'd ask what was wrong, she'd just say work was stressful and that I shouldn't worry about it. After 28 years of marriage, I trusted her completely, so I let it go. That night at dinner, everything started normally. Patricia was her usual social self, chatting with everyone, sharing stories. But then something shifted. Out of nowhere, she started making these cutting remarks about me, right there in front of our friends. Little comments about how I'd gotten boring over the years, how I wasn't the man she'd married. At first, I thought she was just being playful, maybe had a bit too much wine. But the comments kept coming, each one sharper than the last. Maybe Frank should spend less time fixing things around the house and more time fixing himself, she said, with this smile that didn't reach her eyes. Everyone at the table laughed awkwardly, and I felt my face burn with embarrassment. I tried to change the subject, but Patricia wasn't finished. She kept picking at me, pointing out every fault she could think of, while our friends sat there uncomfortably, not knowing where to look. Finally, I couldn't take any more. I excused myself and went outside to get some air. I stood there in the parking lot, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Why was she doing this? Was she drunk, or was there something deeper going on? After about 15 minutes, Patricia came outside, but she didn't look sorry at all. Instead, she had this smug expression, like she'd just won some kind of argument. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice dripping with fake concern. "You know I love you, don't you?" I just stared at her, completely stunned. This was the same woman who had just humiliated me in front of people we'd known for decades, and now she was acting like nothing had happened. I couldn't even find words. I just walked away, leaving her standing there under the restaurant's dim lighting. When we got home that night, I lay awake, replaying everything. Something was definitely wrong. This wasn't just Patricia having a bad day or drinking too much. My gut was telling me she was hiding something important, and I was determined to figure out what. The next morning, Patricia acted like the previous night never happened. She was humming while making coffee, scrolling through her phone, completely cheerful. Meanwhile, I was barely holding myself together. The sting of her words was still fresh, and her casual attitude made it even worse. "Good morning, honey," she said brightly, sliding a cup of coffee toward me. "Did you sleep well?" I looked at her carefully, trying to read her expression. Was she testing me? Did she really think I'd just forget what happened? "Not really," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Do you want to talk about last night?" For just a split second, she hesitated. I almost missed it. Then she put on that same fake smile from the night before. "Oh, come on, Frank," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "I was just having fun. You know how I get after a few drinks." "Having fun?" I clenched my jaw, trying to stay calm. "Patricia, you embarrassed me in front of our friends. That wasn't fun. That was cruel." She sighed like I was being unreasonable. "You're making too big a deal out of this." Everyone was laughing. It wasn't serious. It was clear she wasn't going to take responsibility for what she'd done. Pushing the issue would just lead to another argument, so I dropped it for the moment. But that nagging feeling in my stomach wouldn't go away. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention to Patricia's behavior. The more I watched, the more obvious the changes became. She was constantly on her phone, smiling at messages she'd quickly hide if I came near. She started going out more, girls' nights and work events she'd never mentioned before. When I'd ask about them, she'd get defensive and accuse me of being possessive. One evening, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I'm not proud of what I did next, but my suspicion was eating me alive. The message was from someone named Vincent. Vincent, can't stop thinking about last night. You were incredible. Same time next Thursday? My blood went cold. My hands were shaking as I read the message over and over. Who was Vincent? And what did he mean by last night? Before I could look deeper, I heard the shower turn off. I quickly put her phone back and sat on the bed, trying to look normal. When Patricia came out in her robe, she smiled at me briefly before checking her phone. Her face lit up for just a moment when she saw the screen. Then she locked it and tossed it on the bed. Everything okay? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Of course, she replied, a little too quickly. Why wouldn't it be? I didn't answer. Instead, I watched as she got dressed and climbed into bed, scrolling through her phone until she fell asleep. That night, I barely slept. My mind was racing with questions. Who was Vincent? Was this an innocent message between friends, or was it something more? Deep down, I already knew the answer, but I wasn't ready to face it yet. I needed proof. The next few days were torture. Pretending everything was normal while that message replayed in my head was almost unbearable. Patricia acted like her usual self, cheerful and carefree. But every time her phone buzzed, I felt a stab of dread. I knew I had to do something. If I confronted her without evidence, she'd probably deny everything and make me feel like I was the problem. I needed solid proof, and that meant crossing a line I'd never crossed before. On Wednesday, Patricia told me she was going out for another girls' night. Her casual tone sounded rehearsed, but I forced a smile and kissed her goodbye, watching as she grabbed her purse and headed out. The moment her car disappeared down the street, I grabbed my jacket and followed her. I knew this was wrong, but I couldn't help myself. I needed answers. She drove across town to a trendy restaurant I'd never been to. My stomach dropped when I saw a man waiting outside. Tall, well-dressed, definitely not one of Patricia's usual friends. She got out of her car, her face lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in years. The man, Vincent, I assumed, wrapped his arms around her and pulled her into a hug that lasted way too long. I sat in my car, my heart pounding, as I watched them walk into the restaurant together. Part of me wanted to march in there and confront them right then, but I stopped myself. If I wanted the whole truth, I needed to be patient. The next day, I took a step I never thought I'd take. I hired a private investigator. It felt extreme, but I didn't see any other choice. If Patricia was cheating, I needed more than just my suspicions to prove it. The investigator, a straightforward guy named Raymond, promised to get to the bottom of it. He assured me he'd be discreet and would have answers within a few days. Waiting for Raymond's report was agony. Every time Patricia laughed at her phone or left the house for another work event, my anxiety grew. But I kept my composure, knowing the truth would come out soon. 3 days later, Raymond called. "Frank, we need to meet in person," he said, his tone serious. "I have everything you need to know." We met at a small diner on the other side of town. When I arrived, Raymond was already there with a thick manila folder on the table in front of him. "Here it is," he said, sliding the folder toward me. Photos, timestamps, everything. My hands trembled as I opened the folder. Inside were pictures of Patricia and Vincent together, holding hands, laughing, kissing. One photo showed them entering a hotel late at night. Another showed them leaving the next morning, looking completely comfortable with each other. My chest tightened as I stared at the evidence. There it was, the undeniable proof I'd been dreading. Raymond looked at me with sympathy. "I'm sorry, Frank. I know this isn't easy." I nodded, unable to speak. My mind was spinning with anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. I wanted to scream, to confront Patricia, to demand answers. But I knew I had to stay calm. If I acted out of anger, I'd only make things worse. When I got home that night, Patricia was already asleep. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching her sleep peacefully, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. I had the proof. I had the truth. Now it was time to decide what to do next. I spent most of the night staring at the photos Raymond had given me. Each image felt like a punch to the gut, but they also gave me clarity. There was no denying it now. Patricia was cheating on me, and she had been for a while. The hotel photos made that clear. Anger surged through me as I thought about the man in the pictures. Vincent, who was he to destroy my marriage? But then I realized this wasn't just about him. Patricia had made her choice. She was the one who betrayed me, who lied to my face, who humiliated me in front of our friends. By the time the sun came up, I'd made my decision. Confronting her directly wasn't enough. I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions, to understand what she had thrown away. But I wasn't going to stoop to her level. No shouting matches, no dramatic scenes. My response would be quiet, calculated, and unforgettable. The first step was gathering more information. I didn't want just the pictures. I needed to know everything. I called Raymond and asked him to dig deeper. "Follow her," I said. "I need to know where they're meeting, what they're doing, and how long this has been going on. Leave no stone unturned." Raymond agreed, and for the next week, I lived in a strange limbo. Patricia continued her charade of being the perfect wife, smiling, laughing, acting like everything was fine. But I noticed the small cracks in her facade. She left the house for hours at a time, claiming she had errands to run. Her phone was always glued to her hand, buzzing late at night when she thought I didn't notice. But I did. Meanwhile, Raymond's updates started pouring in. Patricia and Vincent weren't just meeting at restaurants and hotels. They had an entire routine. Lunch dates during the week, long drives to secluded spots outside of town, evenings spent in places I'd never even heard of. What hurt the most wasn't the physical betrayal, it was the intimacy. The way she smiled at him in the photos, the way they held hands like they were in some fairy tale romance. It was like she'd given him the parts of herself that used to belong to me. By the end of the week, I had everything I needed. Raymond had compiled a detailed report, complete with photos, videos, and even text message logs he'd managed to retrieve. I felt sick as I read through their exchanges. "Patricia, you make me feel alive again. I don't know what I'd do without you. Vincent, you deserve so much better than him. Soon, we'll have everything we've dreamed of." Everything they dreamed of. I laughed bitterly at the absurdity of it. What exactly had Patricia dreamed of? Destroying our marriage? Throwing away 28 years of love and trust for this? But as much as the texts stung, they also gave me an idea. If Patricia thought she and Vincent were building some fantasy life together, I was about to give her a reality check. The next morning, I started putting my plan into action. The first step was securing everything that mattered to me. I spoke to a lawyer and made sure my finances were protected. Our joint bank accounts were frozen, and my personal savings were moved to a separate account in my name. Then I started going through our house. Anything that was truly mine, my laptop, sentimental items, family heirlooms, I packed away and stored at a friend's place. I didn't want Patricia to have access to anything once the truth came out. But I wasn't done yet. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done, and that meant hitting her where it hurt the most, her reputation. I printed out a few of the photos Raymond had taken. Nothing explicit, just enough to show Patricia and Vincent together. Then I wrote a short note. Patricia, I know everything. We'll talk when you're ready to be honest. I left the note and the photos in an envelope on her nightstand. When she found them, there would be no escaping the truth. I wasn't sure what her reaction would be. Would she try to deny it? Turn the blame on me? Or would she finally come clean? Either way, the ball was in her court now. That evening, I waited for Patricia to come home. My heart was racing, but I kept my face calm, my voice steady. When she walked through the door, she greeted me with her usual cheerful smile, completely unaware of the storm waiting for her upstairs. "Hey, honey," she said, dropping her bag by the door. "What's for dinner?" I smiled back, though it didn't reach my eyes. "Go check the bedroom," I said. "I left something for you." Her smile faltered. "What do you mean?" "You'll see." She hesitated, studying my face for a moment before heading upstairs. I stayed in the living room, listening for her reaction. It didn't take long. A few minutes later, I heard a sharp gasp, followed by hurried footsteps as she came back down the stairs, holding the envelope in her hand. "Frank," she said, her voice shaking. "What? What is this?" I looked her in the eye, my expression unreadable. "It's the truth, Patricia. Now let's talk." Patricia stood there frozen in the middle of the living room, clutching the envelope like it might burst into flames. Her face had turned pale, her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. I stayed seated on the couch, calm on the outside, but boiling inside. I wasn't going to make this easy for her, not after what she'd done. "What's wrong, Patricia?" I asked, my tone measured. "You seem upset." Her eyes darted to the envelope, and then back to me. This isn't what it looks like," she stammered. I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really? Because it looks a lot like you've been sneaking around with Vincent. You know, the guy you've been spending all your girls' nights with." Her jaw dropped. "How do you—" She stopped herself, realizing too late that she'd just confirmed my suspicions. "How do I know?" I finished for her. "Let's just say I'm not as clueless as you think I am. I've known for weeks, Patricia. Weeks." The color drained from her face, and she sank into the armchair across from me. "Frank, I can explain." "Explain?" I interrupted, my voice rising for the first time. "Explain what exactly? That you've been lying to me? That you've been humiliating me behind my back? That you've been giving some other guy what I thought we had?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't let them sway me. I'd seen enough to know those tears weren't for me. They were for herself. "It wasn't like that," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It wasn't serious." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "Not serious. You've been sneaking around, meeting him at hotels, calling him the love of your life in your texts, but it wasn't serious." Her eyes widened. You read my texts?" I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "You're damn right I did. And I've seen the photos too. Every lunch date, every hotel room, every lie you've told me. So don't sit there and try to minimize it, Patricia. Own up to what you've done." She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking as she sobbed. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of pity for her. But then I reminded myself of the humiliation she'd put me through, the nights I'd stayed awake, wondering what I'd done wrong, the betrayal that had ripped through my life like a hurricane. "I don't know why I did it," she finally choked out, her voice muffled by her hands. "I was unhappy. I felt stuck. Vincent made me feel alive again." "Alive?" I repeated, my voice icy. "And what about me, Patricia? What about the vows we made, the life we built together? Did that mean nothing to you?" She looked up at me, her mascara running down her cheeks. "It's not that simple, Frank. I still love you, I scoffed, shaking my head. Love. Don't you dare use that word. Love doesn't do this. Love doesn't betray, doesn't humiliate, doesn't destroy everything in its path. What you feel isn't love. It's selfishness. Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't care. She needed to hear this. I trusted you, Patricia. I gave you everything I had, and you threw it all away for some fling. It wasn't just a fling, she blurted out, then immediately clapped her hand over her mouth, realizing her mistake. The room fell silent. My chest tightened as her words sank in. So it is serious, I said quietly. She didn't respond, but her silence was answer enough. I stood up, towering over her as she sat crumpled in the armchair. You've made your choice, Patricia. Now I'm making mine. Her head snapped up, panic flashing in her eyes. What do you mean? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I've already spoken to a lawyer. The divorce papers are being drawn up. And don't worry, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly why this is happening. You want to feel alive? Fine. Go live your new life with Vincent. But don't you dare come crawling back to me when it all falls apart. Her sobs turned to pleading. Frank, please don't do this. We can fix this. I'll end it with Vincent. I'll do whatever it takes. It's too late, I said, cutting her off. You already made your choice. Now, you have to live with it. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her crying behind me. My heart was heavy, but I felt a strange sense of relief. The truth was out, and I was finally free. But this wasn't the end. Not yet. I still had one final move to make, a way to ensure Patricia and Vincent would never forget the consequences of their actions. The days following our confrontation were some of the most surreal of my life. Patricia tried everything to make me change my mind. She cried, apologized, begged, and even made grand promises about cutting Vincent out of her life. But I knew better. Her words felt hollow, like a desperate attempt to hold on to something she had already destroyed. I avoided her as much as possible, staying late at work or crashing on the couch to avoid sharing a bed. She was clinging to the illusion of control, but I'd already taken steps to dismantle the world she'd built on lies. The final piece of my plan was to make sure Vincent knew exactly what he was getting into. Patricia thought she could walk away from this unscathed, starting her new life with him while leaving me to pick up the pieces. But that wasn't going to happen. I still had Raymond's detailed report, complete with all the photos and text messages. While I didn't want to create a public scandal, I also wasn't going to let them walk away from this unbothered. I found Vincent's address easily enough. He lived in a sleek condo downtown. One evening, while Patricia was out doing who knows what, I drove to his place. As I pulled into the parking lot, my heart pounded in my chest. This was it, the moment I'd been building toward. I wasn't looking for a fight. I just wanted to make sure he understood the full weight of what he'd done. I walked up to his door and knocked firmly. A few moments later, the door opened, and there he was. Vincent. He looked exactly like he did in the photos. Tall, confident, and annoyingly smug. His expression shifted to confusion when he saw me. "Can I help you?" he asked, clearly trying to place who I was. "You don't know me," I said, keeping my voice calm. "But I'm Frank, Patricia's husband." His face went pale. For a moment he seemed frozen, like a deer caught in headlights. Then he stepped back, holding up his hands. "Listen, man, I held up the manila envelope. "I'm not here to fight. I just think you should see this." He hesitated, then took the envelope from me. As he flipped through the photos and read the text messages, his expression changed from confusion to embarrassment, and finally, to guilt. "I didn't know she was still. I thought you two were done," he said weakly, avoiding my gaze. "Don't play dumb," I replied, my voice sharp. You knew exactly what you were doing, and now you get to deal with the consequences." He looked like he wanted to argue, but instead, he just nodded. "Look, I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean for this to happen." I laughed bitterly. "You didn't mean for this to happen? You think that changes anything? You think that undoes the lies, the betrayal?" He didn't respond. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "Here's the deal. Patricia's all yours now, but you should know something. She's not the woman you think she is. And when this all falls apart, and trust me, it will, I hope you remember this moment." Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the doorway with the evidence of their affair in his hands. As I drove home, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, anger, sadness. Confronting Vincent hadn't fixed anything, but it had given me closure. I'd said my piece, and now it was up to them to deal with the fallout. When I got home, Patricia was waiting for me. She looked exhausted, her eyes red and puffy from crying. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice small. "Taking care of business," I said curtly. She didn't press further, probably sensing that she wouldn't like the answer. Instead, she sat down on the couch, looking at me with desperation in her eyes. "Frank," she said softly, "can we please talk?" I sighed, sitting down across from her. "Talk about what, Patricia? What's left to say?" "I made a mistake," she said, her voice breaking. "A terrible mistake, but I love you, and I want to fix this. Please, just give me a chance." I studied her for a long moment, searching her face for any sign of sincerity. But all I saw was fear. Fear of losing the comfortable life we'd built together. "I don't think you understand, Patricia," I said finally. "This isn't something you can fix. You didn't just hurt me, you destroyed us, and I can't come back from that." Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't let them sway me. "I'm filing for divorce," I continued. "And I suggest you start figuring out what your next steps are, because this life we had, it's over." She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. I stood up, walking toward the door. "I'll be staying with a friend for a while," I said. "Take some time to think about what you've done." And with that, I walked out, leaving her alone in the house that used to feel like home. The next few days felt like stepping into a strange, unfamiliar world. I stayed with my best friend Greg, who offered me his spare room without hesitation. He didn't ask too many questions, just gave me a cold beer and a place to collect myself. That's what I needed: space and time to think. Patricia blew up my phone, leaving voicemails that swung between tearful apologies and angry accusations. One message would be, "I'll do anything to fix this," and the next would be, "You're throwing everything away over one mistake." But I didn't respond. I couldn't. Vincent, on the other hand, was silent. No calls, no messages, nothing. Part of me wondered if he'd bailed on Patricia the moment I left his doorstep. The thought brought a small, bitter smile to my face. But as much as I wanted to move forward, the reality of divorce wasn't as clean or satisfying as I'd imagined. There were lawyers to meet, assets to divide, and endless paperwork to sign. Each step felt like ripping off a bandage, exposing a wound that hadn't even begun to heal. One day, while I was at work, I got a call from Raymond, the private investigator. "Hey, Frank," he said, his voice cautious. "I thought you'd want to know. There's been some developments." "What kind of developments?" I asked, my heart sinking. "I've been keeping an eye on Patricia like you asked. It looks like she and Vincent had a falling out." I sat up straighter. "What do you mean?" "Let's just say their romantic getaway plans didn't go as expected. Vincent hasn't been seeing her, and from what I've gathered, she's been spending a lot of time alone. She even tried showing up at his place, but he didn't let her in." I didn't know whether to laugh or feel sorry for her. Patricia had gambled everything on her fantasy with Vincent, only to have it fall apart before it even began. "Thanks, Raymond," I said. "Keep me posted if anything else comes up." After the call, I sat at my desk, staring at the wall. A small part of me felt vindicated. Patricia was finally facing the consequences of her actions. But another part of me felt hollow. This wasn't how I'd envisioned my life turning out. That evening, Greg and I sat on his back porch, sipping beers and watching the sunset. "So," he said, breaking the silence, "what's the plan now?" I shrugged. "Finish the divorce? Figure out what's next, one step at a time." He nodded, taking a sip of his beer. "You're handling this better than I would. If it were me, I'd probably be in jail right now." I laughed, shaking my head. "Trust me, I've thought about it. But what's the point? Hurting her or Vincent wouldn't fix anything. I just want to move on." Greg raised his beer in a toast. "To moving on then, and to better days ahead." We clinked bottles, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. 2 days later, Patricia showed up at Greg's house. I was in the middle of packing up some of my things when I heard a knock at the door. Greg answered it, and I could hear her voice, pleading, frantic. "Please, I just need to talk to him," she said. Greg hesitated, then turned to me. "You want me to tell her to leave?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. As much as I didn't want to face her, I knew this conversation was inevitable. "It's fine," I said. "Let her in." Patricia stepped inside, her face pale and her eyes swollen from crying. She looked smaller somehow, like the weight of her choices had finally caught up to her. "Frank," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry. I know I've said it a million times, but I don't know what else to say. I messed up. I ruined everything. And now—" She trailed off, wiping her eyes. "Now, I've lost you." I crossed my arms, keeping my distance. "What do you want, Patricia?" I want to explain. I want you to understand why I did what I did." I raised an eyebrow. "Why? So you can justify it? Make yourself feel better?" "No," she said quickly. "I know there's no excuse. I need you to know that it wasn't about you. You didn't do anything wrong. This was all me, my insecurities, my stupid need for excitement. I threw away the best thing I ever had because I was too selfish to see it." Her words hit harder than I expected. Part of me wanted to believe her, to hold on to the woman I'd fallen in love with. But the other part of me knew it was too late. "I appreciate you saying that," I said, after a long pause, "but it doesn't change anything. What's done is done, Patricia. We can't go back." Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "I know. I wish I could fix this." I sighed, my voice softening. "I wish you could too. But some things can't be fixed." She looked at me for a moment, as if hoping I'd change my mind. But when I didn't, she wiped her eyes and turned to leave. As the door closed behind her, I felt a strange sense of peace. The chapter with Patricia was coming to an end, and for the first time, I was ready to start a new one. The days after Patricia left Greg's house were eerily quiet. I had expected to feel a mix of regret or even guilt, but instead, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: freedom. I finalized the divorce papers with my lawyer. It wasn't an easy process, but I stayed calm and focused. Patricia, surprisingly, didn't contest anything. Maybe she realized she didn't have a leg to stand on, or maybe she was too preoccupied dealing with the fallout of her relationship with Vincent. Either way, we were officially divorced within a few weeks. During that time, I began to reflect on what had happened. For so long, I'd been stuck in the narrative of betrayal and heartbreak. But now, I could see things more clearly. Patricia had made her choices, and they revealed who she truly was. As painful as it had been, I was grateful to have learned the truth, even if it came at a steep cost. One afternoon, I got an unexpected call from Raymond, the private investigator. "Hey Frank," he said, "I thought you'd want to know. Patricia and Vincent are done. I guess things didn't go as she planned. She's been staying with a friend, but from what I've gathered, she's not doing well." I wasn't surprised. Whatever fantasy Patricia and Vincent had built together, it clearly couldn't withstand the weight of reality. But I didn't feel joy or vindication. If anything, I felt pity. Patricia had burned every bridge in her life, and now she was left with nothing. "Thanks for letting me know, Raymond," I said. "But honestly, I've moved past it. Whatever happens to her now is her problem, not mine." And I meant it. For the first time, I wasn't consumed by thoughts of Patricia or Vincent. I was focused on rebuilding my life. A few weeks later, I decided to take a leap. I'd always wanted to travel, but had never made the time for it. Now, with nothing holding me back, I booked a solo trip to Colorado. The trip was exactly what I needed. Hiking through beautiful mountain trails, standing on rocky peaks overlooking vast valleys, and sitting by campfires under starry skies. It gave me a chance to reconnect with myself. I realized how much of my identity had been tied to my relationship with Patricia, and how little I'd invested in my own happiness. During one of my hikes, I met a group of travelers around my age. They were friendly, easygoing, and invited me to join them for dinner at their campsite. For the first time in months, I found myself laughing and enjoying the company of strangers. One of them, a woman named Catherine, stood out. She was intelligent, funny, and had a quiet confidence about her that was refreshing. We ended up talking late into the night, sharing stories about our lives and what had brought us to the trail. I didn't feel ready to jump into anything romantic, but meeting Catherine reminded me that there were good people out there, people who valued honesty and kindness. When I returned home, I felt like a new person. The house that Patricia and I had shared no longer felt like a prison. I redecorated, got rid of old furniture, and made the space my own. I also reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years. They'd heard about the divorce, of course, and were quick to offer their support. Some of them admitted they'd always thought Patricia was a bit self-centered, but they hadn't wanted to say anything. Better late than never, I joked, raising my beer during one of our nights out. Life slowly began to feel normal again. I wasn't completely healed. I knew that would take time, but I was no longer defined by the pain of Patricia's betrayal. One evening, as I was sitting on the porch, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Patricia. "Patricia, hi Frank. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry again for everything. I hope you're doing well." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part of me knew it was the final piece of closure I needed. "Frank, thanks Patricia. I hope you're doing well too. Take care." And that was it. No anger, no bitterness, no need for revenge. Just a simple goodbye to a chapter of my life that was finally over. Now, as I sit here writing this, I realize how much I've learned from this experience. Betrayal is devastating, but it doesn't have to define you. It can be the catalyst for growth, for rediscovering who you are and what you want in life. To anyone reading this who's going through something similar, you'll get through it. It won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight. But one day, you'll wake up and realize you're stronger than you ever thought possible. Here's to new beginnings. After Patricia's final apology, I realized just how far I'd come. Months ago, I couldn't imagine a life without her. Now, I was standing at the edge of something new, ready to step into the unknown. It wasn't just about leaving the past behind. It was about building something better for myself. I threw myself into work, picking up projects I'd neglected for far too long. My colleagues noticed the change. "You seem different," one of them said during a coffee break. "Lighter, maybe. I smiled, realizing they were right. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own life. But it wasn't just about work. I started exploring hobbies I'd always been curious about, but never pursued. I joined a local hiking group, took up photography, and even started volunteering at a community center on weekends. Each step felt like reclaiming a part of myself I'd forgotten. One weekend, while photographing in a nearby park, I ran into Catherine, the woman I'd met during my trip to Colorado. She was visiting the area for work and had decided to explore the local sites. "Frank," she said, her face lighting up, "I didn't think I'd see you again." We ended up spending the afternoon together, walking through the park and catching up. There was no pressure, no expectations, just two people enjoying each other's company. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Catherine turned to me and smiled. "You seem happy," she said. "I think I am," I replied, surprised by the honesty in my own voice. That evening, as I sat on my porch, I thought about how far I'd come. The pain of Patricia's betrayal hadn't disappeared, but it no longer defined me. I had learned to let go, not just of her, but of the anger, the bitterness, and the need for answers I'd never get. Instead, I focused on the future. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. Months later, I received a small card in the mail. It was from Patricia. "Frank, I wanted to thank you for how you handled everything. I didn't deserve your kindness or patience, but you gave it to me anyway. I hope you find the happiness you deserve. Patricia." I folded the card and placed it in a drawer. It wasn't closure. I'd already found that on my own. But it was a reminder that even in the messiest endings, there could be moments of grace. Life is unpredictable, filled with twists and turns you can't always control. But sometimes those very moments force you to grow in ways you never thought possible. And for that, I was grateful.